Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you guys are joining me through this mini-series. We are actually doing a Bible study with the book called Seamless. So if you guys haven't grabbed your book, you can go ahead and check out the links below. I'll have everything linked below, all the resources that I'm talking about today. I do have my Bible here, as well as my study guide and my iPad, which I took my notes on. So we're going to be talking about session 1. So if you guys are doing this with me, then check back on the other videos. I have the introductory, the flip through, as well as some study with me, just so you guys can listen to and just study along. I really just want to talk with you guys about what my biggest takeaways were from this first week, and I want to hear what your guys' takeaways were. Like, what spoke to you? What was God telling you through this week that we got to study with them? So if you guys are new here, make sure to hit subscribe. Also check up here and that'll be the next video to watch that one as well. And make sure you guys like this. I definitely want to provide more content and value for you guys with some of these studies. If you follow me over on Instagram, you know that I'm always sharing my studies and devotions and things that I am doing to strengthen my relationship with God. And so this one is just at a perfect time. I'm no perfectionist. I'm not well educated in the Bible. I have been reading it several times, and there's just still sometimes that I don't get it, and I don't get the meanings or stories. And so She Reads Truth Bible. This is my Bible that I've been reading, and it's the Christian Standard one. I'll have it linked below for you guys. But I've read Genesis a lot. And so this first week, we went through Genesis. And the way the study works, if you're new, you guys can still jump on. There's no prereqs or requirements. If you really want to just do it along, then I highly recommend you purchase your guide and then watch the videos at a later time. Angie Smith is the author of this study, and it is by Lifeway. And I've done a couple other studies with Lifeway. I really recommend their studies. They're really nice. They just kind of have a good format, and they're good for individual as well as groups. So Seamless is understanding the Bible as one complete story. So this does have video access as well, so you guys can watch Angie. She does a little video beforehand. And so this is the group session here, and I'm just going to give you guys a little recap on what I learned and my biggest takeaways were from week 1. Let me get my notes here on my iPad. And so I do use Good Notes to take my notes. If you guys can see on Instagram, I did have some visuals of what my notes were looking like, and they're pretty aesthetically pleasing. I was very proud of them myself, but that's not the point. The point is really getting the knowledge and understanding God's word and his promises and what he's saying to us. And so like I mentioned, the reason why I picked this study was because she goes through the whole Bible. Now, we don't go by chapter or book by book, but she goes through and finds the common thread between what we need to know. Like, what's the main thread between the Bible? What is it all together? So as you guys know, there's so many, there's 66 books of the Bible. And so when you read each one individually, they all have different meanings. They were all written in different times for different people. And so she helps find the common thread. And that's kind of where we're at. That's the journey. That's what we're all walking together. That's what we're doing right now, is we're trying to find the common thread. So the book of Genesis, we started in that for week 1. Now, she does mention that we're going to kind of pop around in some spots just because of the time frames, or we're going to be popping in different books, which she did do that towards the end. The first, pages 10 through 11 in your guide is just the intro. So she's asking about what us as a group, if we're studying it as a group, and if you guys are with me, then you guys have these questions already, but what is one thing you want your group to know about you? And then what drew you to the study? And I already mentioned that with you guys, why I wanted to learn the study. And one thing about me is that my grandma gave me my first Bible when I was 14 years old, and it was a teenager Bible. So I've had it. I've always had a Bible with me. I've always, from different houses that I moved to, I've always had a Bible, different ones. And as I became a woman and got married, I think the Bible that I purchased on my own, I actually bought one, was by Joyce Meyer. So I got exposed to her I think on like television. We didn't have cable, so we were watching kind of just what was ever on television. And she was this lady, if you guys don't know who Joyce Myers is, sorry, I'm going off the wagon here, but she is a woman pastor, and she has a really large church. And so she does a lot of preaching, and I remember just hearing her kind of like, she tells jokes, but she also has like real life meaning. She says like straight up. She's kind of like if she was like your wise old grandma. She tells you things straight up, and it just makes a lot of sense. So I was really drawn to her because she shares her story, her personal journeys, and what she struggles with, and I can relate to a lot of it. And so Joyce Myers was somebody that I just started consuming a lot of her content. And then I recall that when I was younger, my mom used to listen to her. She had the cassette tapes in the station wagon. And I remember her listening. I'm like, why are you listening to this lady who's always yelling at us? And now, like, as I became older, I'm that one now listening to her. And she's pretty strong. So you got to be okay with hearing that. And I think at the time I needed that, and I was okay with it. So she offered a Bible, and I purchased her Bible, which had a commentary on it. And if you guys know what a commentary is it's you have the different Bibles, and then the commentary actually interprets it for you. So depending on who you purchase it from, or who, you really want to get someone that's a scholar, somebody that studies, somebody that knows the Bible and that can interpret it in the correct way. And so she provided her Bible with some insights and some devotions. I read that through several times, but it still just didn't jazz me up. It just still, like, I opened it and I read it, and then I purchased some studies from the Daily Grace. Sorry about that. And I did those studies on my own too. So long story short, I've been pretty much in my walk with God and with the Word, and I've had some situations, maybe I'll share another time, a testimonial and things about me and what happened through my spiritual walk, and kind of some things that shook me up. But for now, we are learning about the beginning. We're learning about the beginning, the week 1. And so we have discussion questions. I really like that Angie put these in here because it kind of makes you understand that you're not the only one. So the first question was, when she first started learning the Bible, she said she felt really stupid and that she couldn't understand it, didn't resonate with her. And I think a lot of us right now can totally just relate to that, because the Bible is so far off. Like, there's a lot of my friends that don't even own a Bible or know what the word is. And so when you read this book, you're like, what does this even mean? This is just like some, fairy tales. So she asked about, like, what has been your own challenges in studying the Bible? And I just mentioned briefly, like, some of mine was not just really understanding it, not fully grasping it, knowing who the characters were. Like, when I would be sitting in the sermons and they're talking about, different stories, I don't understand like who that is or what time that was or who was married to what. So it doesn't really resonate with me until, as of lately, it's been more clicking finally after so long. So for me, my biggest struggle is like not knowing the characters, not knowing where the stories lie, when they were written, who they were written by. So tell me, what is your guys' struggles like when it comes to understanding the Bible or studying the Bible? Like, what holds you back? What is it? Share below in the comments. Then there's some other discussion questions, but you guys can go ahead and do that. So first thing, I think what stood out the most is I read Genesis, and we all know that Genesis, let's go back here. Genesis is like the very beginning where God created everything, right? He created everything, and then he created the humans and the land animals. And so as I read that story, I do recall that from like Sunday church, that's just like the beginning, everything's beautiful. And one thing that stood out to me was that he created every single thing. And so when you have the opportunities to go outside and look at nature, or just, sit in your home or sit in your car or sit wherever, like, when you really look at it, like, he created every single thing. Like, it's a blessing. It's amazing when you look at it that way, in those eyes. And Genesis goes in deep in detail of how everything's created. And so I think sometimes for me, when I feel disconnected in the world and I feel like so overwhelmed or stressed out, I really like to unplug and go into nature, and I do feel really grounded and connected. And so it kind of makes sense for me. Like, I understand that now. Like, if God made the heavens and the sky and the land and the sea and the moon and everything. And when you look at that stuff, you just feel connected with the creator. And so some people call it the higher power, the creator. I mean, we're obviously here, we're learning about Jesus Christ and God. So I am using that. But I did, let's see here. So they talk about the fall. She goes into detail about the fall, and not everybody, but like if you're doing the study with me, then you've read it already and you know that the fall is about, Eve eating the apple. Now, this was a forbidden tree with forbidden fruit, and it really gets me thinking because woman in the garden, this is in chapter 2. So it says, so I wrote my notes like, so God made everything holy, and in the seventh day he declared it holy and he rested. And so this was in chapter 2, verse 3. There was no rain or there was nothing. So like there was mist that fell on the ground that helped water the earth and created all the, fruits and trees. And it was beautiful. And then in verse 7, that's when he created mankind, right? And Adam was there, and so I think that's beautiful. And he also in verse 8 mentioned the Garden of Eden. There was a tree that was placed in the middle, and we called it the tree of knowledge, which is verse 17. So this is where the story takes a turn, because it talks about woman was made to help the husband in verse 18. And if the woman was made to help the husband, but then she actually helped him sin because she also shared the fruit with him, it just makes you think about your own life. Like I think about myself, and that's where I'm really like digging into the scripture, because I really want to break it down into how it relates to me and where I see God at, like how the verses relate to God and what he's thinking and where he's at, and mankind, right? So we know that she ate from the fruit and she gained knowledge. But then it makes you think about this, right? So it says in chapter, let's see. Also it talks, like I wrote here, that in verse 24, when a man leaves his father and mother and he bonds together with his wife and they become one flesh. I think that's really beautiful, because when you think about marriage, right now marriage is something that people don't really pay a lot of attention to. They don't consider it, but you gotta, like, if you think about it, it makes you as one. You become one flesh. It says it in there. So verse 24 in Genesis, right? Chapter 1. So I wrote here that the serpent tested Eve, and he asked, let's see, temptation is resistant. So God strictly ordered Adam and Eve to stay away from the forbidden tree, right? Okay, we got that point. Now he told them that to protect them. Now, where I think about it in the other perspective, like, for Eve to be wandering in the garden, did she feel some sense of like missing out or some kind of loss? I wrote here that Eve must have felt something maybe less than. I don't know. I don't know. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are, because that's where I'm like trying to like process this, right? Like did she feel something like maybe she wanted to be more like God and Adam? Because when the serpent told her that she was going to gain knowledge, good and evil, and that maybe she thought that she can be a better helper, or that she can be more like God or more like Adam. It doesn't really specify like in there of why she did it. So if you guys know, or if you guys have a commentary nearby, then pop that out and share it in the comments below. But I keep thinking, like, did she feel like she needed more? Did she feel like she was less than? Did she feel like she wanted to be more like Adam and God? So she did that, and the funny thing is that they keep blaming each other. So everyone starts blaming each other. When God asks, is like, hey, I hear you. Like, no, God's asking, like, where are you guys at? And they're like, Adam's like, oh, I heard you, but I was afraid because I was naked. And they said, who told you you were naked? And God knew right then and there, God knows everything. So he already knew from the beginning that they already took a bite of the apple or the forbidden fruit. He already knew that their eyes were open wide. And he still asked them because I think he wanted them to come to him. Now, this is just me, talking this. I think he wanted Adam and Eve to come to him and admit his responsibility of what he did, that I forbid you and I ate the apple. But what happens is Adam starts to blame Eve, and then he blames God. He's like, well, the woman that you gave me told me to take a bite of the apple, and like, you gave it to me, God, that woman, and then you, like, it's not my fault, right? You said she's my helper, but look what she did. And that's in verse 12. I'm kind of using my own language there. And then when Eve's asked, Eve blames the serpent. She says, well, he gave it to me, verse 13. But then God speaks to the serpent and he just says, you know what, like, for what you did, you're going to go ahead and this is what's going to happen for your life. And he also shared that with Adam and Eve, the same thing. He basically told them, this is what's going to happen. And so, here you guys go. Like, you guys disobeyed, and so that's that. But it also makes me think about the woman and how sometimes as a woman right now, we do feel less of, and we're always comparing ourselves, and we're always trying to be more. Like, I want to be more. I want to be a workaholic or a mom or the best mom. Like, we have this expectations like we're never enough. Like, we're always less than. And it just makes me think, like, is it because of where it stems from? Is that, we were created out of man, and so therefore, if we don't have, we're missing something. We're having that less of. We're not that virtuous woman. Like, we're always feeling that need to complete us. And I'll be honest with you, like, I've been in that situation where I always want more and to do more and be more. But the one thing that makes me feel whole and complete is when I'm in the Word and when I'm studying and when I'm worshiping and meditating on God's Word. Every day doesn't look perfect. Every day is a struggle. Every day there's always something to challenge. But when I step back and I stop focusing on just my human needs, and I know that He completes me. Like, I know that's when I feel the most fulfilled and like complete, is when I am with God. And another thing that I reading this Genesis book was, I don't think we read the whole book, actually. We read up to, I think chapter 10. We read up to there, and I think that with feeling that completeness and feeling that wholeness from God is really what He's drawing us to. And there's so many times that we get these trials and tribulations and we just don't understand why things happen to us. And I feel like God puts them there sometimes, like for us to wake up and realize that He's the one, He's calling us to His glory. And so I encourage you in this. Like, this is week 1. It was hard. It was hard setting this time aside versus, like, I already had my whole routine going on where, I have my devotions and my Bible studies and my other books. But this was like something extra. And I had to like pencil this in put it in my iPad, and I had to really take the time intentionally to break down and read and focus on it. The good thing that what the study has is she also has fill in the blanks, and so she asks you questions. If you guys want a copy too of my Genesis notes on my iPad, I'll be happy to send it to you as PDF. I'll link it. You guys can let me know in the comments if you want that. But what I was saying about being like not enough is I feel like society, and right now us as women, we're just always trying to do so much more. And I know I want you guys to know that you're enough, and that you are exactly where you need to be at, and just take a step back and just unplug and unwind and just like take the time to spend with our Heavenly Father, because that's what He really wants. And I say that too because reading that, it shows that God just wants to be so close with us. He just wants to walk with us in the garden. He wants to be with us. And as we go through the other chapters, we do see that He does that with Moses, and He does that with Noah. He walks with them. He shows up for them. He has a relationship with them. And it's like, what are we doing right now? Like, we don't even have, some of us don't even have a relationship with Him. Like, when's the last time you prayed? When's the last time you cracked open your Bible? Maybe it is now, so congratulations, way to go. But take this at your own speed and just really try to meditate and pray about it and ask God to give you the guidance and wisdom to know what he's saying and speaking and to see him in this message, in this word. So we go to chapter 4 because now that she like flips through. So the main thing that I was saying, like, you know, everyone's blaming each other. No one's taking accountability. And honestly, there's consequences. And that happens in real life. If you don't take, you know, if you don't cough up to your consequences and, to, you know, what you did, then there is consequences for it. So this is the beginning. As you see, Adam and Eve now have kids. They have Cain, Abel, and Seth. And with that, they just start replicating more and more and more. So I did find it was interesting that they had lived for a really long time, like 800 years or more. Like it's insane that, let's see, after father's up to 800 years. So they did live for a really long time. So Cain, I recall this story because my brother's named Abel, and so I remember the story. So Cain and Abel were both really, they were the oldest, and Cain presented some of his lands, what he produced was like land, I guess like veggies and like, I don't know, produce. So he presented some of them to God. And Abel presented the best of his flock. So when they did that, God actually acknowledged and he was pleased by Abel's presentation, or Abel's what he gave, right? And he didn't say anything to Cain. He just left it as is. But Cain walked away upset, or no, I didn't say upset. Cain walked away and he was upset, and God did ask him, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that? And the Lord spoke to Cain. So the Lord still had relationships with Adam and Eve as well as their children. He still spoke to them and had an intimate relationship. And then Cain basically responded back, well, you didn't take my offering. You know, like it wasn't good enough for you. So it goes into Cain's ego. He really gets upset and bothered, and it's like, I was like, dude, I do that too. Like if someone is taking what I bought them, they're ungrateful, like they get upset. So I find it interesting that God gave us that kind of personality. Like, he gave it to us as humans, and as we start reading some of the books and chapters, you'll see that God also gets an ego and gets jealous and gets that. And so I thought that was interesting that Cain, you know, he got defensive and he got really prideful. So in chapter 4, verse 8 in Genesis, Cain actually invited his brother to go out to the field with him because he wanted to murder him. Like, how sad is that? So then in verse 7, this is what the Lord said to Cain. So when he asked Cain, what's wrong with you? And he's like, well, I'm sad. You didn't take my offering. He said, if you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. And that's Genesis verse 7. That stood out to me a lot because there's so many times where you get in a situation with another individual, with yourself, and it's just right there. Like the devil's knocking at your door, ready to take your day, ready to take your whole mood, take your life, take your husband, your wife, your kids, ready just to take you. And God's saying that, like, you need to roll over it. You need to overcome that. Well, how are you going to overcome that? Like, how would you do it, right? So that's where, like, by you reading the word and praying and meditating and having community with like-minded friends that can pray for you and be there for you, that's how you're going to overrule it. So Cain did not take that verse to heart. He definitely, he didn't change his attitude. And so I put here, God warned Cain. He told him straight up, like, dude, you need to do what is right. And if you don't, it's going to be right there, ready to haunt you. So then Cain was warned to change his attitude. Sometimes we need that little reminder and we got to take it, but he didn't. So then God, when they came back from the field, Cain came back from the field by himself. And God said, where's your brother Abel? And what did Cain say? am I my brother's keeper? Like, right? Like, what the heck? He got an attitude. He still had an attitude problem. That's verse 9. And I laugh because my brother Abel and I have 3 brothers, and they would always say that, like, am I my brother's keeper? And I thought it was like from some show or something, but I wrote that down because I'm like, oh my God, like that's, but the sad thing is that Cain still didn't feel any remorse. He didn't care. He was just like, dude, it's like, I don't care. He's out of my life. Like, and how many times do we cut family and friends off because they did something to us or they did something wrong to us? And it's like, we have to step back a little bit and have some grace and some forgiveness and some mercy. Like, you know, he could have had a way more abundant life if he would have had the relationship with his brother. Like, our lives would have been so different if Abel was alive. Like, who knows what would have happened? Because remember, these are all our ancestors back here. Like, we were like coming from this tree. So in chapter 5, tell me what you guys think about that story. Like, did you know that story? Did you hear it in Sunday school? Was it the first time? Was it kind of like, whoa, are we just reading a murder story right now? Like, because sometimes these books surprise you. Like, I'll be honest, I can't read this stuff at night. Like, I'll have nightmares. Like, I will have nightmares, and that is not good. So we covered, so far we covered that God created the world and God created people. Adam and Eve sinned, and then that's what created the fall, that all creation's under the curse of sin. So we became pretty much, we're all sinners, and we know that. We all know that. Nobody's perfect here. So then we go into the chapter 5, and it just talks about the line of Adam and how all the people were, all the sons of sons of sons. And we come down to Noah in the end of chapter 5. And Noah this is the time where mankind starts multiplying. At the same time, remember, everybody was living a long life. So there was these beautiful women, and men were taking the women, and everyone was becoming really corrupt. And this is where it says humans became wicked and evil, and it was widely spread amongst the earth. In verse 7, this shows God's character. He says, it says in there, the Lord was deeply grieved and regret making mankind. Like, he regret making mankind. And when you regret something, like, that's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling at all. And so, you know, I when I read that, I was like, I wrote that down in my notes here because I was like, wow, like, that's sad. Like, when you regret something, you have this heaviness of your heart and you wish you could take it back, but you can't. So then at that point, God said, you know what? I'm going to give you guys a lifespan. You guys are all going to be dying about 120 years old, which is, wow, that's a long time, right? So he kind of capped them off because remember, they were living up to like 500s and all that. And so Noah, during this time, Noah was a righteous man and he was blameless. And he had 3 sons, and God found favor in him. So God had a conversation with him and told Noah, hey, he said that he found favor in him and that he wanted to warn him that that he was going to wipe out creation. Like, he was so unhappy that he was going to wipe everybody out. And he wanted Noah to prepare for this. And Noah took what he said and he ran with it. He said, okay, God, what would you have me do? He listened to him. He took his instructions. He did exactly what God ordered. Exactly. Like, he's an obedient son. Like, if I had a son like that and exactly to the T what I did, it's like, whoa, I am so grateful. So in chapter 6, verse 12, that's when God told him, like, we're gonna wipe everybody out. And in chapter 7, this is when we start entering the ark moment where Noah's building the ark. And he's building exactly to the T. And in this chapter, I kind of found it a little bit not that interesting because it was just like a lot of numbers and a lot of the details. But it is important because God lists exact materials and dimensions. So, you know, take your time with that as you need it. He also told him, hey, I found favor in you, so therefore your line of family, your tree, your family tree, your wife, your kids, your son, and your daughter-in-laws, I want you to bring them all on the boat. So when I was growing up, my mom would always be like, hey, since I'm saved, my household is saved. And I just really didn't understand. I'm like, well, Mom, you're the only one. Like, you believe, you go to church. Like, why, how? Like, we're all our own sinners. So I think that this kind of speaks to some of that truth, because sometimes you may be the only believer in your house or at your job or in your community, and you can be the one that sets the foundation. You can be the reason why. You can be the reason why that lights somebody up to want to know Jesus Christ or to be saved. And so Noah, by him being so blameless and righteous, God had favor with him that he said, you are allowed to bring your wives and son and their daughter-in-laws. Now, we're going to read chapters, like, I just thought about this right now because there's another book that God actually tests. I don't recall what character it is. See, I'll have to go back. But he tests one of the, who is it? I'll have to think about it and put it in the comments or pin it. And he actually sacrificed, instead of bringing the lamb to the sacrifice, you guys know the story, then comment below. He tells him, like, to prepare for it, and in reality it's going to be his son, and he's going to sacrifice his only son. And this is probably chapters out, that's probably why I'm getting ahead of myself. But God had him sacrifice his son. So sometimes God finds favor in you and allows you to bring your people, and sometimes he doesn't. And so I'll have to think who that was. I'm so sorry, I got sidetracked here. So other things that he thought of bringing was he wanted them for generations to come and to be reproducing. And reproducing of what? He wanted exactly 7. There's like some magic numbers there's like not magic, but there's meaning behind the number 7. He wanted 7 pairs of every kind of clean animals. He wanted 7 pairs of every kind of birds. And then he wanted 1 pair of every kind of unclean animals. And then verse 5 says that Noah basically did everything the Lord commanded. That we're talking about, like, he was being very obedient. And that's beautiful. Also, Noah was 600 years old. So he was not one of the ones that got capped out at 120. So in verse 6, when the flood actually came, Noah was 600 years old. Can you imagine? Like, I can't imagine that. And then it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and the water stayed on the earth for 150 days. So if you guys get seasick, then you guys know what that feels like. 150 days is half a year pretty much, or like, you know, give or take. Not give or take, because it's like whatever. So 150 days it rained. Here we go again. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but stayed on the earth for 150 days. There we go, got it straight. And that's verse 4. So once, I thought it was interesting because in chapter 8, it says the flood dries up and God remembered, all of a sudden he remembered that he put Noah on there. Like, all of a sudden, after that many days, he remembered him. And he remembered all the wildlife and all the promises that he had given to them. And so he caused wind to overcome, pass over the earth, and dry up some points. And 150 days it took for the water to dry up, right? In verse 3. That's chapter 8, verse 3. And then 7 months, on the 17th day, they landed on a mountain. And the Lord promised him, he said, I want you to spread over the earth and be fruitful, multiply. And that's verse 17. And also in verse 9:1. He tells Noah once they landed, you know, that he wants that promise. Like, he went to him and say, hey, you know, I'm promising you, I want you to do this life. Let's multiply this world. Let's do this over again. And Noah, the blameless and great man that he is, he ended up building a new ark to offer, in verse 12, this is the ark. So he offered every kind of clean, So he ended up building, to offer the burnt offerings. I don't know what I wrote here. I have to reread it. And he ended up offering every kind of clean animal, and he offered a bird for a burnt offering. And this, the Lord smelled it in verse 12, and it was pleasing to him. And he smelled the burnt offering, and it was pleasing. So I don't know if I would have been like, I can't imagine like smelling burnt chicken or something, but it was pleasing to the Lord. And he was like, there is my people. All right, here we go. Here's the promise again. So in chapter 9, God did a covenant with Noah, and he said, hey, you know, I'm not going to do this again. Like, I'm going to give you a bow in the clouds. And I thought that was really beautiful, because you think a bow in the clouds, like, what's a bow in the clouds? It's a rainbow. Like, when I see rainbows, I am just like ecstatic. I love them. I'm like, I try to get so many pictures and videos, and I'm like, rainbow. And they never come out good. I don't know why, because I think they're just meant for that moment, that glory. Like, I have seen some pretty good Instagrammable rainbows though, but for me and my camera photography, I don't have that. And the rainbows, I just basically sit there and I just appreciate them. So when you see a rainbow, think about God's promise with Noah. You know, he promised a rainbow. Like, that's us, guys. So then we head into the book of, quickly, we take a real quick turn into that's it actually. That's the end of week 1. So I know I went off a tangent. I kind of shared a lot with you guys about different things. No, I'm sorry. We did go off into the book of Job. And it talks about how he was so faithful. And if you read that book, it's kind of sad, because he was a really wealthy, healthy man that just really appreciated God, and he always showed him grace. Like, he's always was there, you know, repenting to the Lord. And for some reason, Satan, this is when Satan shows up, and God allows Satan to test Job. And he allows him, so he goes through so much suffering. But he was one of the greatest men of all the East, and that's verse 3. And God allows it. And what this really shows is his loyalty to God. Even through all that suffering, he still rised up. He still said, you know what, God is my God. Like, I am still going to appreciate, and I'm still going to go through this. And so if you read that, I think we're only reading chapter, I think it's 1 through 6. Sorry, guys. So we're still in week 1. This is day 5. And it's chapter 1, 6 through 12. That's like the verse. Like, that's kind of like what we're reading. And Angie actually talks about, like, why would God allow that? Like, that's so horrible. Why would he? I thought he's a good God. Why is he going to allow this man? But I think that what she's saying is that, I guess it's, I mean, I don't know what she's saying. Tell me what you guys think. Like, why? Like, I don't know. Like, I've been through a lot, and I never blame God for it. And I never, I mean, there was this one time where, like I told you, I have to tell you guys another time, but I don't ever blame him for my situations. And I think that it just, to me, it opens my eyes more of how I can be closer, or what do I need to understand the situation. And sometimes your struggles, your life struggles, your situations is defining you and making you better and making you what God wants you to be. And so, like, I sit back and I think about all the things that I went through, and it's like, wow, like, I am just so grateful that I am where I am today. I'm not where I used to be. But there's situations that I've talked to certain people, and I'm like, maybe that's the reason why I was broken in that department, or that's the reason why I was broken in that situation, is because I was supposed to be that beacon or that light for that person. And so at the moment, it doesn't feel good. At the moment, I'm sure it didn't feel good that he lost his sons, and that he lost his wealth, and he lost his animals. And I'm sure it didn't feel good for him at the time, but there was a reason for it. And so I think we have to really just understand that God is good, and that he is a jealous God too. That's also another thing that we'll see. But yeah, so that's kind of where we ended. And so I want to know your guys' takeaways. What did you see? I kind of wrote a lot of different notes in here too, about the flood. So yeah, it looks like that's kind of what all I have to say. I really hope that you guys enjoy this. I know I kind of shared a lot. This is my first time doing like a YouTube Bible study recap. I'm hoping to continue this for the next 7 or actually 6 more sessions of the Bible study of Seamless. And so I'll have everything linked below. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and check me out over on Instagram where I share some daily inspirations and motivations. I also have my digital iPad account, which is at the Social Della Rosa, where I share my digital planning and digital notes there. So I really appreciate you guys, and I want you guys to know that it's okay. You maybe didn't finish all 5 days, and that's okay. Just take it at your own pace, and God's gonna help you work through this. And it's gonna be here for you guys to rewatch. And so make sure you guys comment below and share with me your biggest takeaways. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.